Imagine you are driving down a long, straight highway in the middle of the desert. You can see for miles. There is not a single car, tree, or building in sight. You lock your steering wheel straight, put on cruise control, and relax. You know, with absolute certainty, that your car will keep going straight, because that is how physics works. Now, imagine that without you touching the steering wheel, without a gust of wind, and without a flat tire, your car suddenly turns left. A sharp 90-degree turn into the sand. You would not just be confused, you would be terrified, because cars do not do that. Inertia does not do that. Well, right now, in December of 2025, something just like that is happening in our sky. But it is not a car. It is an object the size of a mountain. And it is not driving on a highway. It is driving through our solar system. And the scariest part, it just decided to turn. This is the story of 3I/ATLAS, and why the smartest people on Earth are currently very, very afraid. Part 1. The Lonely Watch. It was 3:30 in the morning on July 1st, 2025. The summit of Haleakala on the island of Maui, Hawaii, is one of the quietest places on Earth. It is 10,000 feet above sea level, far above the clouds. The air is so thin and cold that if you move too fast, you get dizzy. Up here, there is no sound of the ocean, no tourists, no birds. Just the low, electronic hum of the ATLAS telescope. Dr. Elias Thorne was sitting in the control room, nursing his 4th cup of stale coffee. Elias was an asteroid hunter. His job, day in and day out, was to look at photos of the night sky and spot dots that moved. Most of the time, the dots were nothing, just boring rocks from the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. They were safe. They were predictable. They were family members of our solar system. But that night, the algorithm flagged something new, a single pixel. Elias leaned in. At first glance, it looked like any other faint asteroid. But then he looked at the velocity data. Objects that orbit our sun, like Earth, Mars, or your typical comet, have a speed limit. They move fast, but not too fast, because they are trapped by the sun's gravity. It is like a ball on a string. It can only spin so fast before the string breaks. This object, however, was moving at 58 kilometers per second. That is over 130,000 miles per hour. Elias ran the numbers again. He checked for errors. He checked if it was a satellite glitch. But the math held up. The object was moving too fast to be held by the sun. That meant only one thing. It wasn't from here. It had come from deep space, the endless frozen void between the stars. It had traveled for perhaps millions, maybe billions of years, drifting in the dark until by pure chance, it stumbled into our neighborhood. Elias felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He picked up the phone to call the Minor Planet Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He didn't know it yet, but he had just discovered the 3rd interstellar object in human history. They would name it 3I/ATLAS. The 3 stood for the 3rd one ever found. The I stood for interstellar. But unlike the first 2 visitors, this one was not just passing through. This one was acting strange. Part 2. The Anomaly. Flash forward to October 2025. The object was getting closer. It had crossed the orbit of Mars and was diving toward the sun. Astronomers all over the world were now watching it. You have to understand why this was such a big deal. The first visitor, Oumuamua, back in 2017, was weird. It was shaped like a long cigar or a pancake, and it tumbled end over end. The second visitor, Borisov, in 2019, was normal. It looked exactly like a comet. It had a tail, it was made of ice, and it behaved exactly how we expected. Scientists hoped 3 I/ATLAS would be like Borisov, a normal comet that we could study to learn about other solar systems. But as 3I/ATLAS got closer to the sun, something was missing. Comets are basically dirty snowballs. When they get close to the sun, the heat melts the ice. The ice turns into gas and shoots out, creating that beautiful long tail we see in photos. This process is called outgassing. But 3I/ATLAS, it had no tail. Telescopes like the James Webb Space Telescope looked at it and saw nothing. No gas, no dust cloud, just a solid, dark object. This was the first red flag. If it didn't have ice, it wasn't a comet. It was a rock or a piece of metal. It was incredibly dark. It absorbed almost 99% of the light that hit it. To a telescope, it looked less like a rock and more like a hole in space, a shadow moving against the stars. Then came the second red flag, the rotation. Most asteroids spin. A day on an asteroid might be 4 hours or 10 hours. But 3I/ATLAS was spinning incredibly slowly. It took days to complete one rotation. It was stable, almost too stable. By November 2025, the internet was buzzing. Reddit threads were exploding with theories. Was it a dead planet? A piece of a destroyed moon from another star? Or was it, as the conspiracy theorists whispered, a derelict ship, a Flying Dutchman of the galaxy drifting forever with a dead crew? NASA and the European Space Agency urged calm. It is an asteroid, they said, an unusual one, but just a rock. Physics is physics. And for a while, everyone believed them. Until December 3rd. Part 3. The Impossible Maneuver. This is where the story gets truly unsettling. On December 3rd, 2025, 3I/ATLAS reached its perihelion, its closest point to the sun. It was screaming through the inner solar system, moving faster than anything we have ever built. At the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, in Pasadena, California, a team of orbital dynamicists was tracking its path. They knew exactly where it should go. Gravity is the law. You can calculate the position of a planet 100 years from now with perfect accuracy. But on the morning of December 4th, the data from the tracking stations didn't match the prediction. The object was not where it was supposed to be. It was off by a few thousand kilometers. In the vastness of space, that sounds like a small number. But in orbital mechanics, it is huge. It is the difference between hitting a target and missing it by a mile. The scientists were baffled. Maybe the solar wind pushed it, one suggested. But remember, this object had no tail. It had no gas shooting out. When a comet shoots out gas, the gas acts like a rocket thruster. It pushes the comet the other way. That is called the rocket effect. It explains why comets sometimes wobble. But 3I/ATLAS was a dead rock. It had no gas. It had no thrusters. There was absolutely no reason for it to deviate from its path. Yet, it was accelerating. It was pushing away from the sun. It was gaining speed. Dr. Sarah Jenkins, a senior astrophysicist at JPL, stared at the screen. She ran the simulation again and again. The result was always the same. "It's under thrust," she whispered. She didn't mean to say it. It was a taboo word in her field. Rocks don't have thrust. Ships have thrust. She called up the data from the Deep Space Network. They checked for any sign of natural forces. Magnetic fields? No. Solar radiation pressure? For an object that heavy, sunlight shouldn't be able to push it that hard, unless it was hollow, or unless it was incredibly thin, like a sail. This was the Oumuamua paradox all over again, but worse. Oumuamua had accelerated too, but it was small. 3I/ATLAS was massive, estimated to be nearly 2 kilometers wide. For something that big to accelerate against the pull of the sun without losing any mass required a staggering amount of energy. The scientific community went into a quiet panic. They didn't release this info to the public immediately. They spent 48 hours trying to debunk their own data. They wanted to find a mistake. They wanted to find a loose cable or a software bug. But there was no bug. The object had turned. It had corrected its course. And the new course, it wasn't just random. It was a gravity assist. The object was using our sun to sling itself toward a specific patch of the sky, the constellation of Cygnus. Part 4, The Listening. By December 10th, 2025, the news leaked. Interstellar object defies gravity was the headline on major news networks. People were scared. If it can steer, does that mean someone is driving it? The SETI Institute, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, in California, had already turned their massive radio dishes toward the object. They were listening for anything. A beep, a static hum, a sequence of prime numbers, anything that sounded artificial. Imagine the tension in that control room. You are listening to a microphone pointed at an alien object that just pulled a U-turn in your backyard. They listened on every frequency: hydrogen line, water hole, UHF, VHF. The result? Silence. Absolute crushing silence. The 3I/ATLAS was not broadcasting. It wasn't talking to us. It wasn't talking to anyone else. It was running dark. Some scientists argued that the silence was proof it was natural. If it were aliens, they would say hello, they said. But others, the more paranoid ones, argued the opposite. If you are sneaking through enemy territory, they said, you don't shout, you stay quiet. One theory that gained traction in the dark corners of the internet was the Berserker probe theory. The idea is that advanced civilizations send out automated machines to map the galaxy. If they find a planet with life that could be a threat in the future, like us, they mark it. They don't attack. They just drop a pin on the map and send the data home. Was 3I/ATLAS checking us out? Part 5. The close approach. We are now in the present day. Mid-December 2025. 3I/ATLAS is on its way out. It is passing the orbit of Earth right now. It is at its brightest, but you still can't see it with the naked eye because it is so dark. You need a powerful telescope to spot that moving shadow. Amateur astronomers are pointing their backyard telescopes at it, hoping to catch a glimpse. The internet is flooded with grainy images of a white dot moving against a black background. But the most chilling images came from the U.S. Space Force's Surveillance Telescope on Maui, the same place where Elias Thorne first saw it. They released a high-resolution light curve analysis yesterday. A light curve shows how the brightness of an object changes as it spins. Usually, a spinning rock gets brighter and dimmer in a regular pattern. Bright, dim, bright, dim. 3I/ATLAS's light curve is chaotic. It suggests the object is not a simple potato shape. The data hints at sharp angles, flat surfaces, maybe even something artificial. One researcher described it as tumbling, but not randomly. It was tumbling as if it was trying to scan in all directions. Conclusion: the departure. So what happens now? Nothing. That is the true horror of cosmic encounters. In movies, the aliens land on the White House lawn. In reality, they fly by at 100,000 miles per hour and don't even slow down. 3I/ATLAS is leaving. It is heading back into the black void. It will cross the orbit of Jupiter next year, then Saturn, then Pluto. In a few decades, it will be gone forever, lost in the interstellar night. We will probably never know for sure what it was, Was it a strange rock made of hydrogen ice that we have never seen before? Maybe. Nature is creative. Was it a piece of debris from a planet that exploded a billion years ago? Possibly. Or was it a piece of technology? A buoy? A sensor? A dead ship carried by the currents of the galaxy? We are left with the numbers. The data that says it accelerated. The data that says it turned. The data that says it defied the laws of physics that we hold dear. As you look up at the night sky tonight, remember that space is not just empty. It is an ocean. And just because we are on an island called Earth doesn't mean there aren't things swimming in the water. Sometimes the sharks just swim by to take a look. And sometimes the scariest thing they can do is ignore us. So the next time you think you are alone in the universe, just remember the story of 3. I/ATLAS. The visitor that refused to act like a rock. If you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, make sure to follow for more stories like this.